Streaming now, this is the Wood TV Live Desk.
And good afternoon, everyone. Phil Penarski here with the Wood TV Live Desk. Hope you're having a great start to your Tuesday. It's been a minute since we last saw Matt Jarowski here on the Live Desk, but we just had to talk about his story from this past Sunday. Really had a lot to do with Muskegon and how it was a hotbed for a lot of vaudeville stars and a lot of famous actors back at the turn of the 20th century. So Matt, thank you so much for being here. Glad to see you again. We got to get right into it, I think. Obviously, when you started hearing about when you started working on this story, I just want to know how you first heard about it, because when you think of Muskegon, this probably isn't one of the first things that pops into your head, that it was this hotbed, this destination for a lot of stars.
Right. So, and I always kind of start with this kind of point is I'm from West Michigan. From Grand Rapids. We love it here. And when I come across pieces of local history that I'd never heard of before, those are stories that I typically fall in love with, and this was one of them. It was just a simple, me and the family were on a drive out we're going to have dinner at the lake, and I noticed a neighborhood sign in this small little Muskegon neighborhood about Buster Keaton, and so just doing a quick little deep dive. My wife is driving, and I'm on Google, learning all these random facts. And so that's really where this story came from, learning about the Actors Colony that was founded there, and how Muskegon, as I kind of frame in the article, was Hollywood before Hollywood. It was this home for, at some point, more than 200 vaudeville stars spending their summers up here in West Michigan.
Right. No, and I did want to get to that Actors Colony in just a bit, Matt, because that was one of the more interesting aspects to it, that when you hear Buster Keaton obviously spending a lot of time, as we saw just in that video playing, he's got a lot of memorabilia already down there in Muskegon, but 200 different actors were down there. But first, kind of talk a little bit about why those actors kind of had to travel around a lot and really managed to find their way up to Muskegon, especially, as you mentioned before, Hollywood was Hollywood.
Right. So when we're talking the Vaudeville Era, this is the turn of the century, the late 1800s into the 1900s. This is before like major public radio broadcasts. There's no TV yet. So kind of the primary form of entertainment is all stage. It's whether it's live music, live performances, and so these vaudeville entertainers constantly were circling around the country and traveling and performing, and that was just kind of the lifestyle. So when we talk about Buster Keaton specifically, he was born into a vaudeville family. His parents had a vaudeville act. They toured the road. He was born in Kansas, I want to say, but he never considered that his home. That just happened to be where the family was when he was born. They were there for a couple of weeks while his mom, recovered, and they went right back on the road performing. These smaller acts need to work all year round. They can't afford to take summers off. But talking to local historian Ron Pesch, who knows a ton about this, is once you're kind of a little higher level and you've got yourself established, there are a lot of people that tried to take summers off. Because so many of the theaters, especially in the South, are so hot and swampy, and they don't want to work there because it's just like brutal conditions. So they like to come up to the north in the summertime, and they also use that time to work on their shows. So it was Buster Keaton's father, Joe, that really kind of pushed the Actors Colony forward. Muskegon was just naturally was a hotspot for these people because there was an outdoor pavilion at Pierre Marquette Park, which it's no longer there. The park is still there, where these vaudeville performers would come and put on their shows. Joe Keaton kind of fell in love with Muskegon. He heard about, the timber industry was kind of fading. There's all this land for sale around Muskegon Lake. It's now known as the Bluffton neighborhood. Let's make a summer home here. Let's come here every summer, and we can work on our shows, kick back a little bit. And he brought all of his friends with him, and that's how we have this actor colony.
Right. Now, and was there anything in particular that you found super interesting, as you mentioned, up to 200 actors at one point were staying there in that colony? Hearing some of these stories that you probably learned about, was there anything in particular that kind of stood out about that Actors Colony?
The thing that really kind of grabbed my attention is, okay, so we know some of these stories, we know the people that were here. How many stories don't we know? Is kind of how my brain focused on things. I know there's one of the acts He had all sorts of wild animals in his act, so he had his own zebra, and he was known for he had an elephant in his act. And so this little neighborhood in Muskegon for the summer, sometimes there'd just be an elephant kind of walking down the street, which is something that like you don't think about that happening in any real capacity, but this was a thing that happened in Muskegon.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned it, that you spoke to the local historian, Ron Pensch, and just kind of, spoke with him, really heard stories that he knew about regarding Muskegon's time there, kind of in the spotlight, really, of entertainment at the turn of the century. But he's also working on a documentary, and something that he really touched on. It's about Buster Keaton, obviously one of the bigger names that spent time in Muskegon. One thing he mentioned was that a lot of documentaries, there's so many, Buster Keaton is one of those silent film stars that even if you don't watch silent movies, you kind of recognize that name.
Yep.
But it kind of gets glanced over, his time in Muskegon. And so you actually talked to him a little bit about the documentary he's working on.
Yeah, so he's part of a couple of projects. First of all, he's a history buff. He just loves history. He loves telling these stories. So he loves sharing Muskegon's history. He's also obsessed with Buster Keaton, a phenomenal silent film actor. He grew up and joined his parents' vaudeville act, and so he was first known as a vaudeville actor, but he really came to fame once the vaudeville act broke up. He went into silent films and movies and ended up having a career that spanned into the 60s in Hollywood. But for Buster, part of what makes his story so interesting is he's this big name that we can recognize, but he was the one who specifically, even after the Actors Colony kind of dissipated, after the vaudeville movement kind of fell apart and everything went towards New York and LA for the growing film industry, Buster was the one who always called Muskegon home. He never really had a place where they could, that he considered his home, but every summer when he was a kid, they would come to Muskegon, and that's when he could actually be a kid. When he's on the road performing, he's not going to school. They're on different trains, riding to and from cities, at the pavilion, in the theater, working on things. He was a working child. So for him, Muskegon is home. Muskegon was those summer breaks in his time to be a child, and even well into his advanced age, he always considered Muskegon his home. So Ron is part of a team that's working on a documentary. It's called Buster Keaton Home. As you mentioned, most documentaries on Keaton are really focused on his film career because that is what he is known for.
Right.
And rightfully so. This documentary, it kind of focuses, yes, Buster was a major film star, but he puts the focus on his upbringing in this Actors Colony and the vaudeville movement that kind of sparked all of that. So I know that's being shopped around to different film festivals right now, so hopefully we'll be able to view that some point soon. I know there's a link to the trailer inside the story online, and then there's also a convention this upcoming weekend. Every year, I'm blanking on the name of the group, the International Buster Keaton Society, excuse me. They put on an annual convention in Muskegon where they draw people literally from all over the world to come to Muskegon, of all places, and they kind of take a little tour of the Bluffton neighborhood and see some of the sites that are still there. I know the home where Buster Keaton grew up is no longer there, but there is a cement wall, a retaining wall, and I didn't even include this in the story, that the Keatons put up on that property with their names and or initials etched into the cement there.
Really?
That's still there. So there's a lot of even down to specific addresses, like this act, these people lived here, the Keatons lived here, all this fun stuff. And then of course they auction off different memorabilia and all sorts of stuff, and then it culminates with a big showing at the Fronthal Theater on Saturday, showing some of Keaton's rare clips, and just being able to relive those things in a theater which you just can't experience anywhere else, including a live organ for some of the silent films. So really cool thing that you can check out to support their society. There's a dinner included with it. Just a lot of really interesting things, and to bring that West Michigan tie. I think it's important to tell those stories, and it's those little things that make our local community so unique. And this is a line that Ron said. He's like, every community's got Bed Bath & Beyond. It's what else that makes your community unique, and for Muskegon, this is part of that story.
Right, definitely, and it is a pretty incredible story, something that, as I mentioned at the beginning of this conversation, Matt, that I would have never in a million years thought that was Muskegon's claim to fame. So definitely really appreciate you doing all the legwork on finding all the information about that and putting together a story that I think a lot of people can appreciate. And if you have not been able to check out Matt's story just yet, well, I highly encourage you to do so. You can find a link to it right now over on our website, woodtv.com. Just click into the comment section or the description box. If you're watching us on Facebook, you'll find a link to it there again. Matt, it's been a minute, but very glad to have you back on the live desk. It was great talking to you again, and yeah, great piece as always.
Anytime. Hopefully we can do this more often. Hopefully
Yes.
things settle down a little bit.
Yes, hopefully.
We'll
praying
see.
for that. Yeah, all right, Matt. Well, and I want to thank everybody else for tuning into this latest edition of the Wood TV Live Desk. I'm Phil Pinarski, and we hope you have a great rest of your day.